from the quiet shores of the people of the water, where the sea meets the mountains. This is the High Strangeness Sleep Society, a gathering for sleepless wanderers and seekers of the strange. In the late hours, we trace the line between the world you know and the one just beyond it. So settle in, breathe deep, and let the night unfold. Tonight we stay up late with a reporter who set out to explain the lights in the sky, and with the older, stranger idea he found wearing them. John Keel was born in Hornell, New York in 1930 and raised mostly by his grandparents in the small town of Perry. He sold his first story to a magician's magazine at the age of 12 and left school at 16 to write full-time. He made his living writing for newspapers and radio, and after Army radio work during the Korean War, he spent 4 years wandering Egypt and India and the Himalayas, chasing the rope trick and the Yeti. That journey became his first book, Jadoo, published in 1957. Through the 1960s, he wrote for television in New York. Then, in 1966, a magazine asked him for an article about flying saucers, and the assignment took hold of the rest of his life. The magazine never ran the piece. By then, it did not matter. Keel had started reading the saucer reports the way a reporter reads a city scandal, expecting to find something ordinary in an extraordinary costume. He began collecting accounts from newspapers and small-town witnesses, following the lights from one county to the next. Most of them came apart in his hands: a balloon, a bright planet low on the horizon, an aircraft at the wrong angle and the wrong hour seen by a tired man. A few did not come apart. The witnesses who held up under questioning often reported more than a light. They described voices on the telephone that carried no human speaker, sounds with no source, coincidences that gathered around certain people in certain towns. Keel wrote in his notes that whatever this was, it seemed to follow whoever paid attention to it. The deeper he read, the less the object in the sky interested him, and the more he found himself watching the web of small events spreading out around it. For most of his first year on the subject, Keel believed what the serious people believed. Lights in the sky meant craft, and craft meant pilots, and pilots meant visitors crossing the dark from another planet to look at ours. He had no quarrel with a tidy answer that worked. This one stopped working a piece at a time. The reports did not behave like an expedition. They came in floods, season after season, far more of them than any survey of one small planet could need. The figures in the accounts appeared and vanished where no craft could land. Their messages contradicted each other. The predictions they handed to witnesses arrived and passed with nothing behind them. And the same details kept turning up in the mouths of people who had never met. A man in a dark suit knocking in the summer heat, asking a short rehearsed list of questions about lights in the sky, then leaving without a name. Keel would log the visit and find a nearly identical account already in his files from a different state, a different witness, weeks before. Most unsettling to him was how often the saucer reports sat beside other things entirely. The same households described knocks on the walls, figures at the foot of the bed, dreams that seemed to answer each other across a county. The light in the sky and the haunting in the bedroom arrived, again and again, in the same places, to the same people. Like Hynek and Vallée, the other careful men working the same ground in those years, Keel had hoped to confirm the visitors from space idea. By 1967, he had let it go. He wrote later that his own fieldwork had turned up too deep an overlap between the psychic and the saucer to keep them apart, that we tend to see what we are prepared to see, and to name it according to whatever our own century already believes. He did not announce a reversal. He simply found that the word he had started with no longer covered what he was looking at. If the lights were not machines from another planet, Keel had to say what he thought they were instead. He reached for a word of his own. Not extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial. Not from beyond the Earth, but from alongside it, here already and old, taking whatever shape suited the person in front of it. He came to this by walking the record backward. In our own time, the visitor is a small gray figure, met in a bedroom, late, with the witness unable to move. Go back to the closing years of the 19th century and the same country fills with reports of a great airship, a long craft with brilliant searchlights, drifting over towns from one coast to the middle of the land in the winter and spring of 1897, years before any man had flown. Go back further, past the machines entirely, and you reach the old fairy faith of Europe. People led into a hill or a lighted hall and returning to find years gone in a single night. Infants lifted from cribs. Travelers struck motionless on a dark road. There is a picture Keel kept circling, and it is the simplest way to hold his whole idea. He sometimes framed it as a table with 5 people seated around it, each from a different century. A medieval monk sits at one place who has seen a wheel of fire in the sky and shining messengers who delivered instructions and vanished. Beside him, a woman from an old European village who knows the fairy folk steal travelers off the dark roads. Then a Victorian farmer who watched the great airship pass over his fields with its searchlight burning. Then a driver from the 1960s who pulled over for a silver saucer on a country highway. And last, an airline pilot from our own time who has logged a glowing sphere that paced his aircraft and then was gone. Each describes a different visitor. Keel's question was whether all 5 were describing the same one, in the only language each of them had. The encounter held still. Only the costume changed, updated each time to whatever the age was ready to believe. An airship for the century of engines, a spacecraft for the century of space. And the detail Keel returned to most, the machine in the story was always a single step ahead of the people who saw it, and never further than that. Once Keel stopped sorting the lights from the hauntings, the categories he had inherited began to fall away in his hands. He had kept separate drawers for separate mysteries, the way most of us do, one for flying saucers, one for ghosts, one for the religious vision and the figure of light at the end of the sickbed, others for the poltergeist that throws crockery in a quiet house, the fairy that leads a child into the woods, the creature glimpsed at the tree line that no field guide will name. One by one, he found he could no longer keep the drawers shut. The details kept spilling between them, the paralysis, the lost time, the smell of sulfur, the voice that knew too much, the evidence that would not survive till morning. What if, he asked, these were not many phenomena, but one, met in different moods and filed under different names? It led him somewhere genuinely strange. If a single source could appear as an angel to one century and a spaceman to the next, then it was not bound to any one shape, and perhaps not bound to matter at all. Keel began to suspect that the reality we move through is only a narrow band of something much larger. The eye takes in a sliver, the ear takes in less, and the world we agree to call real is a thin slice of a far wider spectrum. Somewhere past its edge, he thought, something reaches through now and then, and wears whatever face we are ready to receive. That idea would grow in his later work into a thing he called the superspectrum, and it is large enough to keep for its own night. What matters here is the turn it marks. Keel was no longer investigating spacecraft. He was investigating the possibility that ghosts and gods and saucers and the things at the tree line had always been one system, glimpsed through one keyhole by people who each called the keyhole the whole door. The longer Keel watched, the less it behaved like a traveler and the more it behaved like a show. The activity flared where it was being watched and quieted when the attention moved on and returned later in a different form. Those who wanted contact were given messages of peace. Those who feared an invasion were given machines and monsters. It told people what they already half believed and then withdrew before any of it could be checked. And what it left behind when he wrote it down read less like a report than like a script with the logic taken out. Witnesses were handed prophecies that half came true and then curdled, a date that brought nothing, a warning that pointed nowhere. Visitors gave names that sounded almost human and never quite were, delivered with a flat, rehearsed politeness. Voices arrived on telephones that should have been dead, holding conversations that bent away from sense the moment a witness tried to pin them down. The men in dark suits asked their clipped questions, knew things they had no ordinary way of knowing, and then were gone, untraceable, their black cars belonging to no dealer anyone could find. And the evidence had a way of leaving with them. A scorched ring in a field, a photograph, a letter, fading or misplaced or never quite developing until the witness was left with a story and nothing to set beside it. None of it added up, and Keel came to think that the not adding up was the point. He stopped looking for the message inside the contradictions and started watching the contradictions themselves. He put it to himself almost like a ledger. If the purpose had been to tell us something, it had failed remarkably often. If the purpose had been to keep us uncertain, it had almost never failed. He did not think the actors were angels, and he did not think they were quite devils. The place he landed was colder than either. He called them tricksters, playful, deceptive, indifferent to whether a human being could follow the game. The miracle and the menace were the same performer in different costume, and the audience never once looked past the costume to the actor. It was not a comfortable conclusion for a man who had built a career on the faith that any strange thing, given enough patience, would come apart into something ordinary. The patience held. The ordinary answer kept not arriving. There was one more pattern in the files, and it had to do not with who or what, but with where. The sightings did not fall evenly across the map. They gathered. A particular valley, a particular stretch of river road, a particular small town would fill a filing cabinet with reports while the next town over stayed quiet for a generation. The strangeness came in waves there, year after year, to the grandparents and then the parents and then the children, the same lights over the same fields, until it was just another part of the local weather. Keel called these places window areas, and he thought the curtain between the ordinary world and the wider one simply hung looser in them. The places tended to share a few plain features. Water, often, a river, a reservoir, a long reach of coast. High ground or old worn hills. Sometimes a fault in the rock beneath. People who grew up in such a place tended to already know. They learned which road not to take after dark, and were rarely surprised by what they met on it. Keel's own window was the Ohio River Valley around Point Pleasant. But the pattern did not begin or end with him. The nocturnal lights of the Yakima country in Washington state returned to the same ridgelines for decades. Slow boomerangs crossed the Hudson Valley in the early 1980s, watched by thousands. In Norway, the lights of Hessdalen still appear in a single quiet valley and nowhere near it. Different witnesses, different decades, the same odd geography. A few thin places on the earth where the signal seems to come through clearer, and the rest of the map stays dark. The window stays where it is. The people move away and the lights keep their appointment with the valley. To understand what the work cost him, it helps to know where he sat. Point Pleasant is a small industrial town on the Ohio River in West Virginia, with an old munitions works north of it that everyone called the TNT area. Through 1966 and 1967, it filled with the whole catalog at once. Lights over the fields, a winged figure that frightened drivers on the back roads, household phones that rang with voices in the wrong rhythm, and dark-suited men asking their questions. Keel made trip after trip down from New York, and the town has a particular weather to it in his account. A diner on a wet night near the end of the year, its windows fogged, coffee going cold while a farmer turned his hat in his hands and described what had crossed the road in his headlights. Out past the last streetlight, the two-lane road to the TNT area ran black and shining between close walls of trees. Back in the motel room, a notebook filled, page after page, the lamp on and the radio low. And at the wrong hour, the telephone would ring, carrying a voice that was almost a voice, saying a thing it had no way of knowing. He sat in those kitchens and diners and took the accounts down, and the longer he stayed, the more the place behaved like one of his windows. Some of the people he met began to receive things directly, a date, a warning, a mission, handed down the line or by a visitor who knew too much, that came partly true and then turned to nothing. A man would build the next part of his life around a prophecy, and the life would not hold the weight. Keel wrote it all down. And somewhere in those long wet weeks he noticed that he was no longer only writing it down. It would have been easier if the thing had stayed on the page. It did not, and the man taking the notes began to find himself inside them. In his apartment in Manhattan, the telephone began to ring at odd hours. The voices on the line were almost voices in the wrong cadence, saying things they had no ordinary way of knowing. Predictions came down the wire and came partly true. Appointments turned up in his calendar that he had not made. Letters arrived answering questions he had only thought to ask. The coincidences came faster than chance should allow until the word itself wore out. He had been the reporter at the back of the room, certain of a simple explanation. Somewhere in those 2 years, the room turned around. and the story he was chasing began quietly to chase him back. He kept working, but he kept a second kind of record now. The calls, the timing, the sense of being handled rather than merely observed. He told a friend it was as though the city itself had started studying him through his own reflection. He never fully climbed back out, and he came to suspect something worse than danger. If the thing fed on attention and on confusion, then the act of investigating it, writing it down, telling the story of it on a quiet night like this one, might be exactly the kind of attention it had been working to attract all along. In 1970, Keel gathered the years of fieldwork into a book and gave it a name out of an old story about a gift that was not a gift. He called it Operation Trojan Horse. The flying saucer, he argued, was the wooden horse. Humanity had wheeled the legend in through its own gates, delighted, certain it had received a visitor from the stars, and something far older had ridden and hidden inside it. The same intelligence earlier ages had met as gods and fairies and angels and demons was simply dressed now for the century of rockets. The saucer was not the arrival of something new. It was the latest costume on something that had never left, and the belief in spacemen was the horse that carried it past our guard. We had not been invaded from above. We had opened the gate ourselves and welcomed it in, without once asking what we had truly invited. That was why the book unsettled almost everyone who picked it up. It was too strange for the skeptics, who wanted the whole subject to evaporate under a weather balloon. It was far too skeptical for the believers, who wanted ships and pilots and a planet on a map to point to. Keel offered neither camp its ending. He would not call the witnesses liars, and he would not call the saucers spacecraft. Where each side wanted a door closed, he left it open onto a hallway longer and darker than either had bargained for. He was not alone out at that edge. In France, the astronomer Jacques Vallée had been laying the old fairy accounts beside the modern ones, the lost time, the paralysis, the same pattern surfacing century after century, and had published them in 1969 in a book called Passport to Magonia, named for a sky country a French archbishop had written down to mock more than 1,000 years before. Two careful men, starting from different countries and different trades, had walked to the same strange clearing and found each other already standing in it. The idea never won a seat in any respectable room, and it has never quite left the conversation either. It moved the slow way, passed between people who had seen something they could not file, and it shaped much of what came after, the sense that the saucer might be less a craft than a mirror, that the study of the unknown might be part of the unknown's own design. Every later writer who treats the phenomenon as something ancient and intelligent, rather than something merely far away, is working in the room Keel opened. His own mailbox filled with letters from people who had met the thing themselves. He answered when he could, and more than once he told them gently, not to dig too deeply, that it did not reward the curious. John Keel never found the answer he set out to find. He spent the rest of his life in a Manhattan apartment surrounded by folders and reports, collecting the strange, the way other men collect stamps, and the certainty he had started with never came back. He had set out to explain the lights in the sky. He ended somewhere stranger than where he began, no longer sure the lights were the point at all, suspecting that the figure at the foot of the bed and the shape at the tree line and the voice on a deadline were one old thing wearing many faces, and that he had spent his life learning the faces. Perhaps the most unsettling part was never what Keel came to believe. It was what he could no longer dismiss. He left no final theory. He left the question a little wider than he found it. You do not have to decide tonight. Keel never did.